When a broken man ventures deep into the mountains to vanish without a trace, he doesn't expect to be found. But in the silence, after the world has let go of him, a lone wolf appears from the fog, not to threaten, but to stay. Before we begin, if you believe in the quiet magic of bond between the wolf and the man, subscribe, and let's walk this path together. Snow fell without sound. The flakes came down like ash, slow, floating, without urgency, blurring the ridgeline above the valley. Pines swayed beneath their weight. Bare branches reached up like ribs toward a sky long stripped of sun. Jacob Ellery stood at the edge of the world. He didn't know the name of this mountain, but he'd chosen it on purpose. High, empty, just remote enough to leave no witnesses and just beautiful enough to offer a final kindness. The backpack on his shoulders had only what he needed: rope, a flask, a dull pocket knife. The weight of it had become familiar over the long hike up the slope. Familiar, like regret. Familiar, like the silence that had followed him since he left the last paved road behind. He hadn't spoken a word in 3 days. Not since the motel. Not since folding the letter. It was still in his coat pocket. Pressed flat, sealed, addressed to no one. Just a name, Nora, written in a careful, uncertain hand. Jacob looked out over the drop. Mist rose from the trees below like breath from an animal too large to see. He stood there, watching the fog shift and furl, until his knees began to shake and his heart thudded like a drum that had forgotten its rhythm. He didn't cry. He'd already done that. Months ago, in a hotel room in Istanbul, after photographing a boy who had no name left. He'd tried to tell himself it was just work. Just one more frame. But the sound of that shutter had haunted him all the way across the ocean. There was no sound now. Only snow. He took a step forward. And the earth beneath him gave way. The rock broke loose with a shudder. His foot slipped. His ankle twisted. The next moment was all motion and pain. Branches tearing at his coat, snow in his mouth, sky tumbling into forest floor. When he came to rest, he was face down in pine needles, half buried, breath caught somewhere between lungs and ribs. Pain came next. Blinding. Sharp as a scream he didn't let out. He couldn't stand. The ankle was wrong. Swollen, hot, and already purple under the torn fabric of his pants. Something deeper than a sprain. Something final. Jacob rolled onto his back and stared up at the trees. The sky above was going dark. A storm would come soon. He could smell it on the air. Cold, electric, inevitable. He should have died from the fall. That would have been cleaner. Instead, he crawled. Not far, just to a hollow beneath a leaning pine. The tree's roots had grown around a shallow depression in the earth, like arms curled around a secret. He curled there too, tucking himself into the dirt, teeth clenched. He didn't make a fire. Didn't call for help. Didn't even check the cell phone he knew he had, buried somewhere in the pack. He didn't want help. Not really. Not anymore. He lay there in the growing dark, listening to his own breathing and the wind moving through the forest like a memory too old to name. And then, a sound. Soft. Snow compressing beneath something heavy. Deliberate. Jacob opened his eyes. At first, he thought it was a shadow. Then, a hallucination. Then something else entirely. A shape moved just beyond the edge of the clearing. Gray. Large. Muscles shifting beneath winter-thick fur. A wolf. It stood still, watching him. Eyes pale in the fading light. Not golden. Not yellow. Just old. Like something carved from stone and left to guard the edge of the world. Jacob didn't move. The wolf didn't either. They stared at each other through the snowfall, the hush between them deep enough to swallow thought. Then the wolf stepped forward once. Just a single step. Then stopped again. Not aggressive. Not afraid. Just present. Jacob felt his breath catch, then release. The wolf tilted its head slightly. Snow gathered on its back. It didn't blink. He whispered, hoarse, "Are you real?" The wolf didn't answer. But it didn't vanish, either. Jacob closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the wolf was gone. The cold settled deeper that night. Into the bone. Into the soul. Jacob wrapped his coat tighter, his hands clumsy and numb. The world outside the hollow had gone white, fog and snow making the forest a dreamscape of soft shapes and muted outlines. He thought of Nora, of her laughter, how it had always come in sudden, bursting streaks, like rain on metal. He hadn't spoken to her since the funeral, hadn't returned her last call, the one where her voice cracked when she asked, "Jake, just let me know you're still out there." He hadn't, because he hadn't been. Not really. Jacob closed his eyes and tried not to shiver. The letter in his coat rustled faintly as he shifted. Tomorrow, he wouldn't wake up. That had been the plan. The cold would do what he hadn't had the courage to. But somewhere in the dark, a howl rose. Not close. Not far. Low. Lonely. Not a threat. Not a warning. A mourning. Jacob didn't know why, but he listened. He listened until it faded. And when sleep came, it wasn't empty. Dawn was gray. The kind of light that couldn't warm anything, only reveal how cold everything had become. Jacob stirred beneath the pine roots, throat raw. His breath came in clouds. And there, at the edge of the clearing, stood the wolf. No sound. No warning. Just standing. In its jaws, something dark and limp. A rabbit. It padded forward, slow, deliberate, and dropped the offering just a few feet from Jacob's reach. Then backed away. Then sat. Not watching like a predator, but like a sentinel. Jacob stared. He didn't touch the rabbit. The wolf didn't leave. He whispered, voice barely audible, "Why?" The wolf tilted its head again. Snowflakes clung to its snout. Jacob didn't speak again. Just watched it, until his eyes began to sting from the cold. He drifted in and out through the day. The wolf remained. By the time night returned, it had curled into the snow at the far end of the hollow. Not near. Not far. Just close enough. A flicker of something stirred in Jacob's chest. Something he hadn't felt in months. Confusion. Then resistance. Then something that felt dangerously like awe. As sleep pulled him back under, he whispered one word, barely formed, like a memory of something half-remembered. Asher. Morning came slow and silver. Jacob woke to the sound of wind sifting through the trees, and the low ache of a body still too cold to trust. He shifted slightly beneath the pine roots, ankles screaming with even the smallest movement. Pain, sharp and clean. He welcomed it. It meant he was still here. For a long time, he didn't move. Just lay still, watching frost drip like tears from the branches above. The wolf was gone. The rabbit remained. Half covered in snow now, stiff with night. The gift, or whatever it had been, was still there, untouched. Jacob stared at it with hollow eyes, not quite believing what he'd seen the night before. Had it really happened? The cold didn't care. He dozed again, waking to shivers. Hunger gnawed at the edges of him, but not enough to stir action. He had granola bars in his bag, protein powder, water-purifying tablets. He wasn't here to survive, but his habits hadn't known that yet. He chewed a single bar, slow and without appetite, then pulled his coat tighter and waited for the silence to fold over him again. It didn't. By dusk, the wolf returned. No sound preceded it. No warning. It appeared the way mist does, gradual, ghost-like. A soft thud of paws in snow, a shape emerging from gray. It padded toward the rabbit, sniffed it once, then looked at Jacob. The eyes were not golden, not hungry. They were still. And stillness, Jacob realized, could be louder than words. The wolf picked up the rabbit and carried it back several feet, then dropped it again. This time, closer to Jacob's reach. A line drawn, but moved. Jacob watched with breath held, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet. "I'm not who you think I am," he whispered. The wolf blinked. "You're wasting your time." The wind stirred between them. The wolf remained. That night, Jacob spoke aloud. Not to the wolf, though he lingered near the edge of the hollow again, but to the dark, to the cold, to whatever part of himself had not yet gone completely numb. His voice was gravel and windburn. He spoke in fragments. About Kabul, Aleppo, about the mother who held her child's body like it was still warm, about the photograph that made the cover of the magazine, and the shame that followed. "I thought if I showed the world what suffering looked like, maybe it would change," he said. "But I think I just made them numb." The wolf didn't move. Jacob shifted, reached into the inner lining of his coat, and pulled out a notebook, leather-bound, softened at the edges from years of travel. He opened to a page filled with names, all handwritten, dozens of them, cramped and careful. "These are the ones I didn't take pictures of," he murmured. "The ones I sat with, just for a moment, before I moved on." He touched one name gently with his finger, then looked toward the wolf. "I didn't save any of them." Silence again. Not judgment. Just snow and breath and time. Over the next days, the wolf stayed. He came and went like weather. Never too close, never far enough to forget. He brought more food, another rabbit, once. A bird, once more. Jacob never asked why. He called the wolf Asher, the name floating into his mind one night like something left behind on a childhood shelf. "It means blessing," he said out loud, amused at the irony. "Fitting, huh?" Asher didn't respond. But Jacob liked saying the name. It gave shape to something he hadn't wanted to name. Company. The days blurred. Jacob learned the rhythms of snow and cold and quiet pain. He fashioned a crutch from fallen branches, bound it tight with strips of his undershirt. It worked, badly, but well enough. Every step was a test of will. Every fire he built in the lee of a tree felt like defiance. And always, Asher was there. Not leading, not following, just beside. One night, as the wind howled through the trees in long bone-deep moans, Jacob stirred from a restless sleep to hear movement just outside the hollow. Branches cracking. Heavy breath. He tensed. Eyes wide. Not Asher. A shape loomed through the snowdrift, broad, dark, snorting. A black bear. Not a giant, but real. Close. Curious. Jacob's heart pounded. He couldn't run, couldn't fight. The bear stepped closer. Then, without warning, Asher lunged from the trees. No growl, no sound, just speed. He placed himself between Jacob and the bear, body low, teeth bared, for standing like static. The bear reared back with a grunt, pawing the air, uncertain. They stared each other down, just for a moment. Then the bear huffed and lumbered away, back into the white. Jacob exhaled, trembling. You didn't have to do that." Asher turned, gave him one long look, and curled back into the snow a few feet away. Not like a victor. Just like someone keeping watch. Jacob stared at the wolf for a long time that night. Not with fear. With something dangerously close to reverence. By morning, he stood, crutch beneath one arm, leaning heavy, teeth gritted. Asher watched him from beneath a snow-laden tree. Jacob nodded toward the ridge. "We can't stay here forever." He didn't expect the wolf to understand. But he said it anyway. He took a step. Then another. Every movement was pain. But every movement was forward. Asher rose. Followed. Not behind. Not ahead. Beside. Jacob lost track of time. He walked by sun and breath, resting often, speaking little. The forest blurred, trees older than memory, ravines carved by centuries, creeks frozen in motion. He spoke less. But when he did, it was to Asher. "Do you ever wish you were something else?" The wolf looked at him. "I used to be a son. A brother. A man with something to say. I don't know what I am now." The wolf sat. Blinked. Jacob smiled faintly. "Guess you don't either." One dusk, they stopped at a rise overlooking a frozen lake. The snow had let up. The clouds split open to show the faintest blush of stars. Jacob sat down slowly, leg aching. Pulled out the notebook. He opened to the page with the names again. One by one, he read them aloud. Each one like a candle lit in a cathedral no one else would ever enter. Asher lay in the snow beside him, head on his paws, listening. Jacob reached out and brushed his fingers lightly across the wolf's thick fur. "You're not supposed to care," he whispered. "But I think you do." The wolf didn't move. And for the first time in months, neither did Jacob's hands. That night, as they sheltered in the lee of a ridge, firelight dancing across frost-laced bark, Jacob looked at the last page of the notebook. Blank. No names left. He stared at it, thumb brushing the paper. Then, slowly, he wrote something new. Not a name. Not a place. Just a question. "Why are you still here?" He closed the book. The wind shifted. The fire flickered. And the wolf did not look away. The first step down the mountain nearly brought him to his knees. Jacob grunted, gripping the staff tight beneath his shoulder. His breath came out in gasps, too fast for the cold, too shallow for comfort. The crutch creaked beneath his weight. His ankle burned like a live coal wrapped in ice. Asher watched in silence from a few feet away. Not impatient. Not encouraging. Just present. Jacob didn't look at him. He couldn't. He took another step. And another. Pain was no longer a stranger. It had become a companion. Not cruel, just constant. The rhythm of it, sharp, then dull, then sharp again, beat in time with the crunch of snow beneath his boots. His left foot dragged. The right held what weight it could. His hands blistered from gripping the makeshift staff. Still, he walked. The hollow and the leaning pine vanished behind the slope. The place he'd meant to die was just a memory now, half swallowed by frost. "I don't even know where I'm going," he muttered. Asher didn't respond. But when Jacob paused, uncertain at a fork where the deer tracks split off from the slope, the wolf took 3 steps left and looked back. Jacob followed. The snow deepened. Ice crusted the edges of his coat. His breath turned to mist. His hands cracked at the knuckles, blood blooming softly beneath dry skin. And still, Asher was beside him. When Jacob stopped to lean against a tree, the wolf lay down near the base. When he slipped, once, hard, falling chest first into a drift, Asher rose, circled, waited. Jacob lay there for a long while, cheek pressed to snow. His breath came in uneven bursts. The camera around his neck, useless now, weightless from disuse, pressed against his ribs beneath the coat. He could have stayed there. He might have. But he felt warmth. Not from the snow, or the air, or the sun. From beside him. Asher, sitting in the snow, close enough to touch. Watching. Always watching. Jacob pushed himself upright. Shaking. Teeth chattering. But he stood. And walked. By nightfall, the storm returned. This one was worse. Snow came in sideways sheets, driven by wind that howled between the trees like grief without a mouth. Jacob couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. He stumbled against rocks, branches, himself. He was going to die here after all. And then, Asher stopped. Head raised, ears flicked. He turned and padded off to the right. Jacob followed blindly, trusting something ancient. They found the cave tucked into the side of a granite rise. Shallow, barely more than a scoop in the earth, but enough. Dry. Sheltered. Jacob collapsed inside, dragging snow with him. Asher stood at the entrance, sniffed the wind, then came in after. That night, they shared fire. Jacob managed to spark one, barely, using damp tinder and a stubborn matchbook from a gas station 3 states ago. The flame caught slow, licking up through dry bark with the hunger of something reborn. Asher lay near the fire's glow. Not in it, not seeking warmth, but watching. Jacob peeled off his boots. His socks were soaked. He rubbed his feet near the flame, wincing as feeling returned. He took out the notebook. Not the page with names. A fresh one. And he drew. Not well. Not for anyone else. Just rough lines in graphite, branches, mist, snow, a silhouette of something four-legged beside a fire. I forgot I used to do this, he whispered. The cave swallowed his voice like a cathedral. Later, he opened a pocket in the lining of his coat. Inside, a folded, scorched photograph. A girl, no older than 16, curly-haired and grinning wide, holding an old Canon camera above her head like a trophy. Nora's daughter. His niece. The last time he'd seen her, she was 12 and shy and full of questions. He'd promised to take her to Istanbul. To see the world. Through your lens, she'd said. He'd told her no. Too dangerous. Too much darkness. And when she'd asked why he never answered her letters, he'd said, "Some things are better forgotten." That lie had cost more than he admitted. He stared at the photo. Then looked at Asher. "You think people can change?" he asked. The wolf lifted his head. Blinked. Jacob laughed softly. "Of course you don't." But in the quiet after, the wolf didn't look away. The next morning, the world was white again. The storm had passed, but it left behind a new weight. Snow heavy on the branches. Sky a dull smear. The silence was absolute. Jacob stirred the ashes of the fire. Found enough dry wood to start again. Ate the last of the granola. He didn't speak that morning. Not aloud. Just walked. By mid-afternoon, something changed. The trees thinned. The terrain shifted. And there, pressed faintly into the snow, were footprints. Human. Boot treads, long and narrow, nearly faded but real. Jacob's heart kicked in his chest. He fell to one knee beside the tracks, fingers brushing the indentations like relics. He hadn't seen another human sign in days. Maybe longer. A ranger trail? A hunting path? Asher growled softly. Jacob looked up. The wolf stood frozen, tail low, hackles barely raised. His eyes locked on the right-hand fork of the trail, where the trees grew closer, darker. Then he turned and padded left, looking back once. Jacob followed. That evening, the trail opened up. They stood on a ridge. Below, through the gray light and mist, was a narrow winding road, half buried, half forgotten. A ranger station might be nearby. Shelter. A way back. Jacob stared down the slope. He should have been relieved. But instead, he sank to his knees. The cold didn't cause it. Grief did. Grief he'd buried beneath years of noise, headlines, smoke. Grief he'd ignored until it became background static to every shutter click. Now it rose like a flood. He sobbed, wordless, ugly, primal. Snow fell around him, untouched. Asher moved closer. Sat beside him. Didn't touch. Didn't leave. Just stayed. And didn't look away. When Jacob finally quieted, he looked at the wolf and whispered, "You could have let me die." His voice cracked. "You should have." Asher didn't flinch. Jacob took the photo from his coat, held it out toward the firelight, where it flickered and curled at the edges from earlier burns. The girl's smile survived. Barely. Jacob looked at it for a long time, then whispered, "I don't think she's stopped waiting." The fire hissed. Asher rose. With the gentlest motion, he nosed the edge of the photo toward the flames, but not into them. Just close enough to catch the light. They didn't speak the rest of that night. But the fire burned brighter than it had before. And when Jacob drifted to sleep, it wasn't with fear in his chest. It was with something warmer. Something older. Like trust. By morning, the sky had softened. Pale gold filtered through the trees, casting thin shadows across the snow. Jacob blinked against the light, his eyes unused to anything but gray. For a moment, he didn't move. Then came the ache. The old pain, familiar now, like a bruise on the soul. But beneath it, something quieter stirred. Not joy. Not yet. Readiness. He rose slowly, testing the ankle. It held. Barely. But it held. Asher stood farther down the slope, near the tree line, tail still, ears forward. Waiting. Jacob follow. The descent wasn't easy. The terrain here had changed, less cruel, but no less wild. Trees spaced wider. The ground drier underfoot, the air clearer. Jacob saw it before he believed it, a shape at the base of the ridge. Wood. Smoke rising. A ranger station. It looked abandoned. Old. The porch sagged beneath snow. But it was standing. He laughed, a sharp, breathless sound that startled the silence. "I didn't think there'd be an ending," he whispered. Asher didn't respond. Just watched. Jacob limped to the door and tried the handle. It opened. Inside, the air was stale with dust and time. A fireplace. A table. A rusted lantern and a two-way radio with a cracked face. He turned knobs. Dead. He found a woodpile. Matches. A dented pot for melting snow. A tin of soup he ate with shaking hands, barely tasting. The warmth made everything feel distant, dreamlike. As if he'd imagined the hollow, the fall, the blur of days. He looked outside. The wolf hadn't come in. Later, wrapped in a blanket near the fire, Jacob opened his notebook. He flipped past the names, past the sketch of Asher, past the question he'd written in the cave. And on a new page, he wrote something else. Not a memory. Not a confession. Just 3 sentences. I came here to disappear. But I wasn't allowed. Someone stayed. He tore out the page and laid it gently on the ranger's desk, beside the broken radio. Then he sat on the floor and closed his eyes. Night came. Jacob opened a tin of tea and boiled water on the fire. He didn't speak much anymore. He didn't need to. He just watched the doorway, where snow blew gently across the threshold, and the wolf stood framed in shadow. Watching. Always watching. Sometime past midnight, Jacob stirred. He stepped to the doorway, arms wrapped tight around his ribs, and crossed the porch until he stood face to face with Asher. The wolf's breath came in soft clouds. Jacob reached out. Not suddenly. Not to command. Just open-handed. An offering. Asher stepped forward, pressed his head once, just once, into Jacob's palm. The warmth of that gesture hurt more than any wound. Jacob knelt slowly, pressed his forehead to Asher's. They stayed like that, just long enough. Then the wolf stepped back, and the moment was over. Dawn broke clean and clear. Jacob woke early, dressed slowly, folded the blanket, and cleaned the tin pot. Rituals. Small kindnesses for the stranger who might find the cabin next. He walked outside and stood on the ridge. Below, the road stretched through the forest like a lifeline carved in snow. And there, coming around the bend, was a snowplow, orange, dented, crawling slow through the early light. A ranger truck following behind. Jacob squinted. He didn't wave. He waited. As the vehicles neared, the ranger stepped out. A woman, maybe in her 40s, with wind-chapped cheeks and eyes that didn't miss much. "You the one we've been looking for?" she asked, eyeing his limp, the split coat, the half-healed bruises. Jacob hesitated. "Maybe. You alone?" He paused, turned toward the trees. The fog was lifting now, curling away like breath exhaled for the last time. There was nothing there. Just pines and silence. He looked back at her. "Not really," he said. The ride down the mountain was quiet. The ranger didn't ask much. Just offered a blanket, some trail mix, a radio to call family. Jacob gave her a name. Nora. He didn't say anything else. But when the sun rose behind them, he turned in the passenger seat and looked back. Just once. Weeks passed. The city didn't feel the same anymore. Too loud, too hurried. But Jacob moved through it with softer steps. He didn't return to photography. Not yet. But he wrote letters. Long ones. To Nora. To his niece. To the mother of the boy he'd once photographed and never forgotten. He read books. Cooked meals. Woke at dawn just to listen to the wind. And one morning, in a thrift store 2 blocks from his apartment, he found a framed black and white photo. It wasn't his. But he stood still for a long time. A wolf in snow, turned toward the lens. Half shrouded in fog. It felt familiar. Like something returned. That evening, he had company. His niece, older now, 21, camera around her neck, sat beside him at the kitchen table. "Did you take that one?" she asked, nodding toward the photo on the wall. Jacob sipped his tea. "No," he said softly. "But he posed for it." She laughed, thinking it a joke. He didn't correct her. Later, alone, he opened the notebook again. The last page had only a single mark on it. A faint paw print, smudged in ash. Beneath it, he wrote one line: "Some things find us when we stop looking." He closed the book and laid it beside the fire. Outside, snow had started to fall again. Soft, steady, and somewhere, just beyond the fog, a shape moved through the trees. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from.